This question. Now that you've done this research and you've read these narratives and we've studied her life back then, if we brought her forward and put her in this room today, what would you say to her?
That's those counterintuitive questions. Like what if? Like what if Lincoln survived the assassination attempt on April 14th? What would he do? I'd have to think about that. I'm not sure she'd allow me to say anything either. I think she'd do most of the talking, but I think at some point, I do a lot of mediation now, arbitration and mediation, and that's a mediation question. Because mediators are supposed to be good listeners and let people talk it out, and then try to bring the parties together so that they can decide without confrontation the resolution that you help them come to. And I think that would be the case with her.
She didn't touch you in any way then, either way. You didn't...
No, because of what I said early on. You mean my feelings towards her? Because I look at her with all of those various levels of the individual, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There was plenty of good in there, and there was plenty of bad characteristics. And sometimes if you talk to the secretaries that served the White House, they were pretty ugly incidents. Patronage, dealing with patronage, being subsumed by people who wanted her to go to Lincoln for them, that is to gain favors or positions. I think Catherine Clinton discusses this, as does Jean Baker in her wonderful biography. So there is this person that has all of these multiple layers. Yes?
You put any credence in the Anne Rutledge story?
Well, Anne Rutledge, was that Lincoln's first love in New Salem? That's the question, right? And it's gone through cycles, up and down, yes and no, and Anne was already engaged to another man who left. He would come back after her death, her early death from typhoid. And, but I think the tilt now, because of what Herndon got out of neighbors of Lincoln and Anne's in New Salem, was that there was a serious relationship with them that I think if she had lived would have led to marriage. I think that's the tilt. That's the tilt today, and I tend to buy into it. But we really don't know for sure. But the evidence, there is enough evidence to come to make that kind of a finding, I think. Yes?
Two things. One, just a little bit more on the court on-again, off-again courtship of Abraham and Mary, whether indeed she was pregnant when and confronted the to-be president with this knowledge, and that's why he got married to her.
I don't think so. Even though Robert was born 9 months after the wedding, right?
Right.
Well, she could have, I mean, what do you want me to say? Are we in mediation now? I suppose the answer is that she conceived the night of their wedding, their marriage. That's the only. That's the politically correct answer, right? I don't know. You know, we don't. That's maybe one thing we'll never know about Mary and Abraham.
The other question is whether Thomas Lincoln ever wrote anything about his mother, his family life. I know he died at 18.
No, he I hate to say this, but he was so spoiled, and he spoke with he had a cleft problem, and he was difficult to understand. Did that come through with the movie too? With he was difficult to understand. I don't want to say he was barely literate, but he was difficult to teach. Unlike his late brother, William Wallace, Willie, who was most like his father. He could write poetry, and did. He could figure out the train schedules from one point to another, and just write down the times and figure them out. He was just an amazing child, and Lincoln, the father, knew this. Not that he loved Tad any less, but because he loved all his boys. That's why I don't buy the slapping incident in the movie either. Never happened. Lincoln never, go to the bank on it, raised his hand to any one of his 4 boys. Go to the bank on it. Why they put that in there, other than the stress of enlisting, I don't know. They didn't have to do it to show Robert's keen interest in, it was peer pressure. His other classmates at Harvard had already joined the Army, and he wanted to see a part of it and be a part of it. But I think they could have done that without that scene. So, I mean, Lincoln and Mary doted on these boys. And I think I think part of that comes from her childhood, where she lost her mother at a young age, her real mother. She had a very difficult stepmother. I didn't have time to get into all of this, but the book does get into it. Yes, Eileen.
Is it true that she spent a lot of time at the bedside of wounded soldiers, reading letters, writing letters to their mothers for them? And why did she not want the press? It seems like that would have helped her reputation, but she seemed to not want the press to know about it.
Well, that's right. I think she didn't trust the press because of the way she believed and rightfully so, she was treated. But you're absolutely right. She visited the hospitals here in the district and brought flowers and would do the writing. And the one good thing I remember, the U.S. Mint has these coin series on the presidents and the first and their wives. And when they did Abraham Lincoln and then Mary Lincoln, the reverse had her visiting a hospital, depicted her, which I thought was a great tribute to her and what she did. And why she really would defer having this put out, I'm not sure, other than her own insecurity and her own distrust of how it would be received. Yes.
I suppose this is relevant. What's your opinion of the Emerson book on Robert?
I think it's excellent. I think it's just what's needed after Gough's book, A Man in His Own Right. That's the first one. I think it was done in the 50s. Also a good book, but I think Jason really gets to the nub of the issues with him. Yes.
Given where we're sitting, can you talk a little bit about what this house meant and what role it played in Mary Todd Lincoln's life?
Well, I think it's a great question what this house meant. I think it certainly meant more to Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, the president, than it did to Mary. She, many times when Abraham Lincoln was here, she was traveling, either shopping in Philadelphia or New York, or visiting in the Equinox, staying at the Equinox house, which still exists in Manchester Center, Vermont. In fact, Robert would join her there from Harvard, and that's where he got to love that area and built a Georgian home that's now open to the public, Hildene, in Manchester Center. So I think this was a refuge. I think it was for her too, but not as much as with her husband. Yes.
What are the circumstances of the widow of the Confederate general that stayed at the White House? Was that her idea, his idea?
Well, sure, because that was Helen, her baby sister, Emily, and Emily loses her brigadier general in the Confederate Army at Chickamauga, and it was hell to pay. But Lincoln, being Lincoln, accepted it and took the heat, and she stayed a while. He led her through the lines without giving an oath of allegiance, as many would be required to do. But it got to be very embarrassing because of her very pro-South view that was now getting out. And when people came to visit Lincoln and Mary in the executive mansion, as the White House was called, these comments did not go over well.
So it was her idea, Mary Lincoln.
Yes. But Lincoln acquiesced in it. Who else? Yes.
The question is, in today's world, the media can drive things crazy. I'm curious as to your opinion as to whether or not the media aggravated the situation for Mary Lincoln.
Worse.
Worse.
It was a worse media than today. But here's the difference. Here's the difference, if you can believe it. But there is a major difference. In Lincoln's day, the media were intellectually honest enough to identify what side they were on, or what party he was supporting. Whig newspapers, Republican newspapers, Democratic newspapers, Copperhead, Peace Democrat papers, Know Nothing papers. And so you knew from the get-go where the prejudices and biases were, and you would read it with that in mind. Today, we don't get that candor. You get a subliminal view from the at least the print, if not the electronic news carriers. It's all about selling and advertising. One more. You've been great. You've been so engaged. Tomorrow you belong to me in the courthouse, so I'll ask you questions. Yes.
Robert Lincoln, I understand he had a child, is that correct?
Yes.
And
a couple.
He had a couple. What did he have? I knew he had a girl and 2 girls?
2 girls, I think.
Did Mary ever know those children at all?
And a boy, Jack, who died.
I'd rather, there are no living descendants.
No, is that your question?
No. Robert's children, did Mary ever know the children?
Oh, yeah, well, from a distance. And there are no, as you said, there are no living direct descendants of Abraham and Mary. The last one died out in a Virginia nursing home in about 1985.
There's an Abraham Lincoln II buried in Arlington.
Yeah.
With Robert.
That's Jack. That's his son Jack, who died of an infection while his father was the ambassador to the court of St. James in London.
But he was Abraham Lincoln, was his real name? Or?
Yeah. Called his nickname was Jack. Thank you all very much.